Good afternoon, everyone. We are FSD Group 5 and we are going to discuss about feminism and pop culture. Given the state of the world today, feminism is a highly controversial topic. But during the past few decades, feminism's influence has grown significantly. Pop culture is among the changes that are most obvious in feminism, of course. Our generation is defined by our music, writing, films, and shows, and other mixed media, and feminism has a lot to do with the popular culture that we are experiencing today. So, as we discuss the subtopics of this, I will give the floor to my group mates.
Una sa pag-uusapan natin is the feminist critic. Next is women and its relation to advertising, women and feminism and mass culture. And under feminism theory, may tatlo tayong subtopics, that is the critic and content analysis. The next is patriarchy and psychoanalysis. And the last one is the study of ideology. And under feminist analysis, we have two subtopics. It is the semiology and ideology, and the next one is ideology and audience. Then the last part is conclusion. Dito na tayo sa first nating topic, which is the feminist critic. So sinasabi dito na yung symbolic annihilation of woman ay nagre-refer ito sa kung paano tratuhin ng cultural production at ng media ah, yung kababaihan, paano nila ito walang bahala, i-marginalize, trivialize, or pagbawalan sila sa kung anong interest na gusto sana ng mga kababaihan silang ipakita sa cultural production and mass media. Sa kasunod is cultural representation of women in the media. Sila din na yung perpetuate and nagpe-prevail sa sexual division ng labor. Ah, Parang ang culture yung nagdidikta sa kung ano dapat ang trabaho ng lalaki sa babae, na nagpapataas patuloy ng misconception sa femininity and masculinity. Next is, sinasabi dito na women are socialized into performing traditional roles. So, sinasabi ng pinaglalaban din dito ng mga feminist na yung mga kababaihan daw ay, inaalaw lang silang gumawa ng roles na usually ginagawa ng kababaihan. And bihira na nga lang daw sila mag-appear sa mass media, yung mga typical pa na roles talaga yung, shine-share nila. I mean yung role na ginagampanan nila bilang asawa, nanay, anak na babae, girlfriend, or yung mga traditional na trabaho para sa mga babae like, secretary, nurse, receptionist, teacher, or di naman kaya ay mga sex objects. Yeah, the next is media perpetuates sexual stereotypes to reflect dominant social values. So, dahil nga sa mas pinapalabas lang ito ng mass media sa pang-araw-araw na ganito lang talaga dapat mga kababaihan, ah, mas lalo tuloy umuusbong yung mga, ah, gender stereotypes na hindi naman dapat. At usually daw ng mga gumagawa nito is mga, male media producer or director ng mga lalaki. Next is, the mass media symbolically annihilates women through portrayal, substance contempt, and trivialize. Next, the reflection hypothesis suggests that the mass media reflects the dominance and not the society itself. So ito nga, sinasabi lagi ng mass media na para 'to sa ikabubuti ng ah, mga manonood, pero hindi talaga. Kasi gaya ng mga napag-aralan natin last time na mas inintindi nila yung kikitain nila kaysa sa kung anong maipalabas nila sa TV. Ah So itong part na 'to na women are marketed and with popular television with media dominating programs, so hindi naman 'to gaano na napa-practice ngayon dahil nga mostly naman sa mga, ano sa TV, mix na talaga lagi ng babae at lalaki. Next is the portrayal of incompetence extends the denigration through victimization and trivialization. So, ah, masyado nilang dinidiin, biktima na nga yung babae, mas lalo pa nilang ah, sinisisi, kumbaga. Biktima sila, mas lalo pa silang sinisisi. The next is, mga adverts on television banish female roles of housewife. Eto yung gusto nilang, advocacy nila na tanggalin na yung sa television yung mga babae bilang housewife, mother, homemaker, sex object na naglilimit sa roles ng mga kababaihan sa society. Ito yung hiling ng mga ating feminist groups. So next tayo, women in advertising. So dito naman, sinasabi dito ng mga kini-criticize ng mga feminist natin yung advertising and media representation ng women bilang isang sexist and perpetuating sa gender stereotypes. So totoo naman, 'di ba? And content analysis of advertising has shown that gender stereotypes are portrayed regularly in ads. So sinasabi dito na yung mga, gender stereotypes as mas lalo pang naipapasiwalat sa pamamagitan ng mga ads na kesyo yung mga babae daw, hindi sila dependent na consumer sa mga produkto at may kaunti lang silang, expertise sa pamamalengke whatsoever sa authority. And mas lalong binibigyang pansin nila yung mga kalalakihan bilang independent, mas objective sila at knowledgeable about product, while women is effective lang. While yung mga women naman is dine-depict sila as domestic and sexual in or sexual contexts. So dun sila mas binibigyang focus. Then nasabi din sa isang study nung 1990s na 89% ng mga ads ay kahit na babae yung subject dun sa advertisement is lalaki pa rin yung nagvo-voice over. So noon, oo, dominant 'to or evident na nangyayari pero sa ngayon hindi naman na 'to gaano. And kapag nire-represent yung women sa mga ads dapat kailangan maganda. May nakita na ba kayo nag-endorse ng sunsilk na pangit, 'di ba parang wala pa naman. So yun yung medyo binibigyan din nila. So women are twice likely to be depicted as married and receive sexual advances. So again, totoo naman 'to. Na-observe naman natin 'to. Wala pa tayong nakikita ng mga nagse-sex workers na lalaki, TV, so mostly mga babae. Next, feminists argue that such media representation, so sinasabi nila na kapag nagpatuloy yung ganitong pag-represent nila sa mga kababaihan, mas lalo lang nilang pinapatibay yung sexual stereotypes. And nananawagan sila na mas gawin nilang accurate yung pagre-represent nila ng gender sa mga ads. So, yun lang po para sa part ko. Proceed na po tayo sa ating next reporter.
So now let's discuss the relationship between feminism and mass culture. One way of appreciating the difference between the feminism we have looked at so far is provided by Modleski's account of the relationship between gender and mass culture. Modleski's general point in the first statement provided is that gender has a fundamental relevance for mass culture and popular culture, that is a strong reputation of the idea that gender should be added to the picture to make it more comprehensive and representative. Furthermore, Modleski argues that our attitudes towards mass culture are linked to notions of the feminine, with women being held responsible for its harmful effects, while men are privileged to have the responsibility for high culture. Anne Douglas' case suggests that women writers were responsible for the emergence of mass culture, as their work was inferior to their male contemporaries. With this, Modleski argues that the focus should be on understanding why consumption is a problem for women in patriarchal societies, rather than blaming them for the increase of consumerism. Moving on to the next bullet, Douglas' arguments exposes the masculinist bias of politically oriented criticism, which uses metaphors of production and consumption to differentiate between progressive and regressive activities of reading. It also demonstrates how sexist constructs of gender and masculinity are used to evaluate popular culture and establish its inferiority to high culture. The table presents the perspective Modleski criticizes as a set of propositions that privilege masculinity and art at the expense of femininity and mass culture. Before I end my part, let's have an example to further understand the relationship of gender to mass culture. High culture critics fear that audiences are becoming passive, vulnerable, and prone to consumerism by mass culture, suggesting gender is central to our understanding of popular culture. The concern high culture critics have expressed about audiences becoming more feminine demonstrate how important gender is to how we view popular culture. That is all for my part. The next topic will be discussed by Miss Tulay.
So now let us talk about feminist theory and the critic content analysis. Feminist theories offers a critical perspective on content analysis and highlights its limitations in addressing issues related to gender and power. Content analysis is a research method that involves systematically examining textual, visual, or audio content to identify patterns or themes. However, feminist theories argue that this method often fails to capture the nuances of gender and power dynamics that are present in media content. One of the one of the main critiques of content analysis from a feminist perspective is that it often assumes a neutral, objective position that ignores the social and cultural context in which media content is produced and consumed. Feminist theories argue that media content is shaped by a variety of factors, including social norms, cultural values, and power structures, and that content analysis should take these factors into account. Another critic content analysis from a feminist perspective is that it often fails to address issues related to representation and diversity. Feminist theories argue that media content often reinforces gender stereotypes and perpetuates harmful messages about women, people of color, and other marginalized groups. Content analysis can help to identify these patterns, but it may not be sufficient to address the underlying causes of these issues. By taking into account the social and cultural context in which media content is produced and consumed, content analysis can provide a more nuanced reading, understanding of the ways in which media shapes our perceptions of gender and power. Overall, feminist theory offers a valuable perspective on content analysis and highlights the need of critically examining media content into terms of gender and power dynamics.
Good day, I'm Jonaline and we'll be discussing about feminist theory, patriarchy, and the psychoanalysis. We will explore the concept and how they relate to each other. We will also examine their implication for society and individual. Next slide. The capacity of media to reflect the reality of women live in patriarchal capitalist societies from the perspective of liberal feminist and alternative feminist theories, content analysis is highlighted as useful methodology to examine how cultural representation of women in advertising distort the reality of their lives. However, feminist theories have challenged the assumption that media should reflect an objective reality, pointing out that some cultural stereotypes may have social equivalence in the real world. Instead, they argue the reality is constructed and needs to be analyzed by different theoretical perspectives drawn from structuralism, psychoanalysis, and Marxism, with attention to give the relation between women's subordination and patriarchal relationship and the representation to choose relations in the ideological domain, the concept of patriarchy, and introduce the social relationship in which domain exploit the oppressed woman and since a crucial factor in determining how women and men are representing popular culture. Next slide. What is feminist theory? Feminist theory is a social political movement that seeks to address the critique the ways in which gender inequalities and gender-based oppression and perpetuate in societies. What is patriarchy? Patriarchy is a social system in which men hold primary power, authority in social, and women are systematically oppressed and subordinated. Next slide. What is feminist critique of the mass media representation of women and how they thus is differ from early feminist critics? Feminists have long been critical of the way in which the mass media represent women. Liberal feminist viewpoint has emphasized the importance of the mass media reflecting the reality of women live in patriarchal and capitalist societies, and this has been examined through content analysis methodology. However, feminists have questioned this view by asking who defined the objective reality that the media must represent. They have pointed out that some cultural stereotypes may have their social equivalents or at least elements of them in the real world.
So, feminist theory and the study of ideology. So, before we move to the next slide, let me tackle first what is feminist theory and the study of ideology. So, feminist theory and the study of ideology are the two closely connected topics that frequently cross paths. So, for us, in order to understand how gender affects our experiences and identities, so feminist theory looks at the social, cultural, and political disparities that exist between men and women. And in ideology and study of ideology, the set of beliefs, values, and presumption that form the basic of the specific social or political system. So next slide. Yan. So in view of what has been argued in the previous topic, a good example to consider is Macrobi's work on female youth, subculture, and popular culture. Yan. In this example, it is no doubt that this example is now a bit dated and no longer representative of feminist analysis of popular culture. And these examples are also useful to discuss for a number of reasons. It uses a number of theoretical ideas, including semiology and concept drawn from the work of Althusser and Gramsci. So next slide. In Macrobi's study, Macrobi's best known work has been about the subcultures of young working class girls and has concentrated in particular on the ideology of the teenage girls magazine called Jackie. And also, Macrobi's study is an ideological analysis of Jackie. And also, Macrobi's function sees the magazine as being to position girls for their later role as wives and mothers through the ideology of teenage or adolescent femininity as it cultivates. So in this study, this examine the relationship between the feminism and the youth culture in the context of British magazine that aimed in teenage girls during the 1970s and 1980s. So next slide. Right. So in the magazine is conceived of by her as a system of science embodying this particular ideology, which tries to secure the acceptance or consent of young girls as individual subjects to its specific code and values. And also the magazine directly addresses a young female audiences on the basis of a consumerism and a culture which defines female adolescents and which hides differences within this group arising from inequalities such as class and race. So in overall, this slide, it is concerning or pertaining that this magazine has a target to a young female audiences which base the narrow definition of feminism and consumerism, well as a cultural construct of female adolescents.
Feminist analysis, semiology, and ideology are three interconnected concepts that can be applied to the study of gender and power dynamics in society. When combined, it provides a comprehensive framework for understanding and critiquing the ways in which gender is constructed, represented, and maintained in society. This focuses on personal and emotional aspects of life that makes everything else appear secondary. Such claims are not objectively validated by semiological analysis and rely on the analyst's ideological position. Macrobis raises questions about the validity of semiology's distinction between latent and overt meanings and the significance attached to hidden meanings. It also concludes that semiology's interpretation can be arbitrary without more objectively grounded arguments. An example is given where Macrobis claims that Jackie makes itself entertaining and pleasurable to read in order to make its ideology acceptable to readers. However, this interpretation could be challenged, suggesting that Jackie's lightness of tone could be a hint not to take its pronouncements too seriously. So the division of surface features into the ideological and ideological element is seen as arbitrary, and without objective criteria, semiological interpretations can be prone to arbitrariness.
Good day, I am Angel, and today I will be discussing about feminist analysis, ideology, and audiences. So, what is feminist analysis? Feminist analysis is critical to approach to understand power relation between gender informed by feminist ideology and aim to engage diverse audience in promoting gender inequality. Next slide, please. For McRoby, the ideology is necessary to explain subject position taken by younger, irrespective of whether or not a magazine like Jack is published. What is important is that the function of ideology is performed. Of course, Jackie is not solely responsible for nurturing this ideology of femininity. Next slide, please. However, a number of problems arise from this argument. First, it is straightforwardly functionalist since it assumes that the function will inevitably be performed because it has to be performed. Second, it presumes that ideology will find expression somewhere within popular culture because it is functionally necessary for its value to be implanted into its target population. Third, these arguments tend to proceed on the assumption that only ideology can influence the way people think and act and neglect other functions which can shape the course of people's life. Mark Ruby argues that ideology has functional character and that semiology is useful in analyzing it. He applies this analysis to the magazine and argues that in order for its ideology to be effective, it must have distinctive appearance that is both fun and entertainment for its reader and potential reader. The magazine must appear natural and given to its reader rather than a product of commodity production and profit seeking. In order for its ideology to be effective, this is similar to Barter's idea that meat work by making ideological and historical ideas must appear natural and inevitable. Next slide, please. Barker asks, if this is the case, will it be hiding or revealing its existence as commodity more if the price were covered up? He argues that Macroby is wrong to equate the naturalness of the magazine with its recognizable appearance, as the two are not same thing at all. The fact that the magazine is produced is not hidden, and its commodity status is difficult to hide since the reader have to buy it. To understand what is feminist analysis, ideology, and audiences, feminist analysis is an approach to understanding media and cultural texts through feminist lens, which seeking to uncover and challenge the way in which gender inequality are perpetuated in society. This analysis considers the way in which gender, race, class, and other intersect identity shape power relation and influence media representation. That's the end of my topic. May I call on Jericho to discuss the conclusion?
Ah, Narinig naman na natin yung full discussion mula sa ating ah, mga groupmates. So, isa tayo dito. So, sinasabi dito na yung chapter na 'to actually guys, hindi ito para mas lalong ibaba yung mga kababaihan. So, ginagawa natin ito or nag-e-effort ang ating mga feminists para mabago na yung pagtingin natin sa role ng kababaihan. And sinasabi rin dito na yung paglaki ng interest sa issue na ito na nai-present nga dun kay Parsers study na sa pamamagitan ng mga theoretical issue and empirical problems associated sa third prong, yun nga, sa mga nabanggit na terms, at accelerism, semiotics, and Marxism. At tingin nila sa pamamagitan nito is gaya natin baguhin yung pagtingin natin sa kababaihan. Next, sinasabi dito na yung pop culture is nag-struggle and contested. Kumbaga, ibig sabihin yan, yung mga dominant ideology natin ay pwede yung mabago or ma-disrupt kung magtutulungan lang tayo na baguhin ito. Next, the shift towards more ethnographic study and popular culture and a growing importance of cultural study approach to analyzing gender. So, sinasabi lang dito na kung magiging mas ethnographic study yung gawin natin sa pop culture, mas lalago pa yung kahalagahan ng pag-study ng culture in approach to paano natin i-analyze yung genders. Sinasabi na consumption is important. Importanteng issue daw to sa mga feminists. Bilang babae, sila yung mga dinidefine as main group ng consumers. So, yung feminist theory and research challenges notion of positive consumer highlight role play na cultural consumption which cannot be simply be understood as a process of subordination. So, hindi lang siya basta-basta maintindihan natin ng ganun-ganun lang. Next is, consumption is a site of negotiation meaning resistance of appropriation, subjection, and exploitation. At ito, ang consumption daw isang economical process na involves to ng value of commodities, limited by income inequality, and the producer of commodities. And next pa is feminist analysis of pop culture still faces general problems. So, marami pa daw silang kinakaharap ng problema. Isa doon ay limited perspective of consumption, the role of production of commodities, and the failure to recognize the conflict na nag-aapekto sa challenges and the commodity farm itself. So, ayun lang po para sa aming report. So, I hope na may natutunan kayo. And I'd like to learn from you naman guys during sa aming reporting and kung ano masasabi niyo sa mga bagay na nabanggit namin during our report. So, ayun lang po and maraming salamat.